Welcome back, or welcome to Footy with Friends. I'm Brady Larkin, college soccer coach, passionate soccer fan, and I can still play a bit. I haven't hung up the boots just yet. And if I'm wearing my fan hat, I'm still very tuned in to the trends of American soccer, be it youth, college, or the professional game. And the same goes for world soccer. I love watching games from different leagues around the world and learning to appreciate how the teams and cultures interpret the game of soccer. In general, I'm curious by nature and I'm hungry to learn. With these conversations, I try to seek out the innovative thinkers, the leaders, and the game changers at all levels of the sport. Footy, soccer, football, no matter what you call it, it's a game that brings people together. And that's exactly what I want to do. And I have a real treat for you with today's conversation with Kathryn Rowe. Kathryn is the mental skills coordinator for the Baltimore Orioles minor league system. You're probably thinking, what does a guest that's from the baseball world have to do with Footy with Friends? Well, prior to working with the Orioles, Kathryn was the mental skills coach with our men's soccer team at the University of Rochester. She was an integral part of our program, making a run all the way to the Final Four in 2018. I believe mental skills training is the new frontier for athletic development. There's a strong correlation between successful teams across all sports and their commitment to building mentally strong and resilient athletes. And Kathryn is a true footy friend. She's a University of Rochester grad and is also a former collegiate athlete herself with the U of R women's soccer team. There are some fantastic nuggets in here for athletes, coaches, teachers, and really anyone dealing with stress. The unfortunate reality is that's probably most of us right now. And that's okay. 2020 was hard. And for some of us, 2021 is just as hard. Today, Kathryn shares some of the mental skills she and her colleagues are teaching the athletes to be able to cope with the demands of playing a professional sport during a pandemic, all while chasing athletic excellence and high performance. So, I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, let's get stuck in. Here's my conversation with Kathryn Rowe. Well, let's start there. I mean, catch me up, on
Okay.
your role now. And I mean, your official job title is what?
My official job title is the mental skills coordinator for the Baltimore Orioles minor league system. So I am head of the mental skills. I'm the only one in my department.
A department of one.
Department of one, yeah. I with COVID being this year, I was going to be obviously in person with two affiliates. And then COVID happened. So I've been doing everything virtually since last March, which I'm grateful for that I've been able to do that. My job still really wasn't impacted as much because I could do all my workshops still. Granted, I couldn't be in person and build relationships with the players, which I love to do, but being able to still do virtual workshops for them during COVID when there were so many unknowns and still are, was great. So fast forward to now, and the plan is for me to, and all of us, to hopefully go down in April and have a spring training and then hopefully a season. So I'll be in person again, which will be great.
Yeah, fingers crossed that all happens. We can get back to normal.
Yes.
So how many teams or how many athletes are you working with or have you been working with?
So in the minor leagues, I don't know off the top of my head. I would say it's around on average like 160 to 180 players. That being
Wow.
said, like I did not work with all of them. Our workshops were not mandatory, so I broke it up by positions to make that a smaller group. So I wasn't presenting to 150 plus people.
Right.
and including the coaching staff, that's another like 40 people, maybe more. So I would say like 200, let's say 200 people in the minor league side. So trying to figure out how to be effective with that many people, and I'm the only person, was something that like I'm still trying to figure out. And
Yeah.
what's interesting too, and like I've brought this up, is I will be working with these players, all of them, during spring training. But then once we break off for seasons, I won't be with all of them and they won't be able to work with me in person. But now, which is great, is that I can do virtual stuff. We have this down now, so Zoom. So
Right.
I'm available to every single minor league player. And whoever takes advantage of that, it's like up to them. It's all voluntary, individual work. So I was able to do work with some players over COVID, which was great because again, we weren't playing. So
Right.
that was awesome. But hopefully it's going to pick up once I'm in person with them.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so. And it's kind of sounds like you can almost do more. I mean, you're more accessible now than had you been in person, and you have to be at these meetings. So it's kind of, I don't know, a blessing to be there, but maybe a burden because you're the only one. What?
Yes, but I love it, honestly. I would be great to, I mean, I love having, coworkers, but they are my coworkers, the coaches, and they help me so much. So I don't feel alone. And my boss is phenomenal. He is always there for me. So, and I still have like my colleagues that I talk with, but in my department, yeah, it's me. But again, like I enjoy it because I don't feel alone because everyone's so connected and we collaborate so well. And I'm really grateful for that. So I am alone, but I'm not.
Okay.
And I'm used to, I mean, like with the U of R men's team, I mean, granted, there's only 30 plus people, but I was the only one. So, like I'm used to it.
Yeah. And you still have that team. I'm sure you're still getting that team camaraderie and that team feel.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It's my coworkers, they're awesome. Very grateful, very grateful.
So talk to me a little bit more about like the I guess the balance of workshops, and it sounds like players can just find you. They can reach out.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did that look like? I guess that balance.
Yeah. So for, again, I guess what I can start with, like what I originally had planned for spring training was to have one workshop a week for the position, like for the different positions, and that would be a theme for the week. So let's just say like self-talk was the theme for the week. So they were going to have at least one workshop on a mental skill for the week, and they could focus and practice on that. And then we would have different, like we'd have meditations and things like that. Then fast forward to COVID. And I tried to transition and do that very similarly. So during the week, we would have, again, one workshop per position. And we would have, we called them Mindful Mondays, where we have meditations on Mondays. And then Fridays would be like a different topic related to mental skills. But I would get input from the players at what they'd want and it was awesome. They would provide things, and then coaches as well. But just to try
Okay.
and get them involved as and engaged and as much as possible. That was my big goal. And then going off of that, like individual work, it's just they reach out to me, and it was great because I mean, blessing in disguise, right? With COVID, our availability was so much better, and it was so
Right.
much more flexible than in season. So they would reach out to me, and then we would just set up a time to meet. Now, that said, going forward, it'll be similar. I will have like workshops again, and then trying to it's and again, like I don't know because of COVID restrictions, like how it's going to work, if we can be in person doing these in a group or what.
Yeah.
But trying to plan for that and being flexible. And then again, players come up to me and we figure out a time. It's just what time works for each other, because I mean, in spring training, the schedule is chaotic. Think of like preseason, but like it's times like 20. Like it's just like so like structured, and we have so many things we need to cover in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out where I can, like plant my seed. So yeah, a lot of the individual work will just be as they contact me and we figure out a time, but there are set schedules for the workshops.
Okay. Okay.
And then in season, it's going to be a whole nother ball game because they're going to be traveling and like we're traveling with them. I would say hopefully maybe like one workshop a week with the team. It won't be as like position based.
Hmm.
And then figuring out like, again, like individual work. I see like the individual work being a lot more prominent in the season than workshops.
That makes sense. And if I recall, it's kind of what we were doing at the U of R. There's
Yeah.
some general things like that are appropriate for a preseason, but then
Yeah.
if you need extra support, you're going to be there. Someone's going to be there to
Yes.
to
Yes.
listen. And
Exactly. Exactly. But again, like we haven't had a season, so it'll be a learning
yeah,
process and it will be great and we'll figure it out as we go.
yeah, we're all just rolling with it.
Just rolling with it. That's all we can do, really. I'll make mistakes, probably a lot, and then I'll learn from it. And then, hopefully we never have a global pandemic again. So we'll see how it goes.
I know, I know. Did you find it hard in bigger Zoom meetings to get engagement? I mean, because that's something we run into all the time as if we're doing team meetings on Zoom, and there's granted only maybe 30 student athletes in our Zooms, but
Yeah.
crickets.
Yeah. Yes, 120%. There would be times where I would just be silent, but that's what I would do. Like I would be silent and I wouldn't answer, and it would wait with that awkward silence for them to answer because someone's going to speak up eventually. But I think after the first couple, when we got comfortable with how Zoom worked, and again, that they recognized that I would not answer, that they would have to answer in silence, they were engaged. And I was very impressed with the players in that and coaches too. Because again, like it was something that they were choosing to go to. They weren't mandatory. So they wanted to be there and they would speak up. And I would always try and do some type of activity. Whenever I do a workshop, I try to do an activity to get engagement. But again, virtual, how do you do an activity, right?
Yeah.
So I would try and find activities that we could do. So we were doing self-talk. So I had everyone do a plank together. We did like a minute plank, and then it was like, okay, like what were you saying to yourself in that moment? And then we were like, okay, let's do it again and let's really focus on what we're saying to try and get through that. Or
Okay.
we did I'm trying to think of other ones I've done. Ones where they had to like do certain things, like I would call on someone to be a participant, and they had to, for like performance anxiety, do a certain task in front of everyone. And then we do it again. And it was just like trying to come up with activities virtually to get them engaged. So it wasn't just me speaking all the time.
Yeah.
Difficult. It was a great challenge, I have to say, because now I have this in my repertoire. I'm like, oh, like I have this, like I can do this, but engagement is very difficult. But I think it's just making that awkward silence be there and having them like wait and have them speak. Someone will speak.
Oh, someone's gonna crack. You know it.
Mhm. Yeah, just like I have to catch myself because I'm like, don't speak, like, don't speak, let them do it. But yeah, I would say over time it's gotten better. Student athletes, I could see that being difficult, for sure. I actually did a workshop with Empire, um, it was Monday, and I've been very impressed of how engaged they were. They use the chat function more than
Okay.
speaking up, but for being like there was 13-year-olds on that, and I spoke with the director. I was very impressed with how engaged these players were. So I think that it depends on the age too.
Yeah. I mean, good for the younger soccer players being that
Yeah,
engaged. Like
yeah,
it's often, college age student athletes, they're almost too cool for it. And they're
yes,
they're zooming from their bed. It just doesn't really, I don't know, it's not conducive for like the most interactive meeting, but I like the idea of getting some kind of activity to get them engaged from the get-go. If it's even like doing a plank or something active where you're on your
yes,
feet, I'm
yes,
sure that's the way to go.
yeah. I mean, personally, I think so. I mean, I thought it worked well because again, like it's not just me or whoever's speaking, lecturing. That's like what my philosophy in like workshops, even just in person. I like to be like short and sweet because I think that's attention spans, like that's what we have.
For sure.
And um trying to get people involved as much as possible. So I tried to just translate that into the virtual side of things, and it will be doing that in spring training. So I'm
Nice.
sure sometimes they were like, oh, we gotta do this. But it's like, yeah, like we're gonna do a plank, get ready. And they all laughed about it too. So things like that. We had some fun activities that we did. Or like even like a video, like showing a video, not
Yep.
to break it up and not just talk the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. And for student athletes, they've had that for 5 hours already that day in class. And so I
Yes,
imagine these pro baseball players have had Zoom meetings earlier in the day too. So it's like, can you just switch it up a little bit, please?
exactly. Exactly. And I don't know about you, but I was getting exhausted with Zoom and like just like being on the screen for so long. So
Oh
something
yeah.
that is different and changing it up was, yes, exactly. Like it was changing it up was helpful for me too.
Yeah. Oh no, I can relate to that too. Well, you made a transition from working with our team, college soccer players,
Yeah.
and now you're working with professional baseball players.
Hmm.
Are all high performing athletes the same, or have you noticed some differences, like from working with folks in different sports?
Obviously, I mean, a difference is just the sport in general, right? And being a soccer player myself, I'm very comfortable with soccer. I know the lingo and I know the rules. um, so switching to baseball was a huge change. I've never played baseball in my life. No one in my family's played baseball, so I had to learn a whole new sport. And
Yeah,
that I think is like one of the first things was like a challenge because credibility wise, like I'm working with these players and they're like, this kind of baseball, like come on. Like, but like I think, I've pride myself on being able to build relationships with the players and acknowledging that I don't know something and learning from them. So that part I think was a huge challenge transition wise. That being said, athletes all have very similar problems or areas to work on, whether it's college, younger kids, or pros. Like everyone has something that they can work on. No one's perfect. And I think normalizing that has been something that's really helpful too. When I tell people I work with a professional organization, I think like they're like, oh my God, like pro athletes, like, but it's like, no, like they have issues too. And we just have
yeah,
to figure out which ones are more prominent with them. So maybe in college, they have more stress related to academics that's affecting their
big time.
performance.
Yeah,
Especially at U of R, you guys have like a billion engineers on your team. Like their schedules are crazy with how much is going on, and then practice and then traveling. But then at the
hmm
same time, like switch to like a professional athlete. Yeah, they don't have like the academic side, but they don't have like any off days and they're traveling. Their schedules are crazy too because they're traveling and like they're on the bus for 8 hours and then
right,
they have 2 hours
right.
to sleep and then they have to go play. And so there's different types of stressors, but everyone's having stress in their life that impacts them. Um, let's say college, like the college boys, playing time, right? That's something that comes up.
Yep,
They're not getting paid, excuse me, they're not getting paid like professional athletes, but then there's the professional athletes where, especially in baseball, like moving up and down from affiliates. So there's different levels, I would say, but generally, I think the general thing is like everyone has similar problems. Like everyone has problems, right? And
everyone has problems. That's the truth.
yeah, so it's like just because they're pro athletes doesn't mean they're perfect. Like, and that's been comforting because like I'm like, okay, like they're human. Like
Yeah,
that's all it is. I've been very comfortable too because the age group is very similar to what I was working with you guys. Like we have 18-year-olds, we have 17-year-olds.
wow,
Um,
okay,
yeah, from getting drafted from high school. So that transition period from like I would equate it to like in college, like a freshman or first year coming onto campus, being the first time away from their parents and like having to transition. Like that's the same for like our 18-year-olds that are coming from high school and having to transition and adjust. So
right.
yeah, it's very, very similar developmentally, which I really enjoy because that's like my favorite age to work with.
Yeah. it's good to know that I don't know, you were able to find some common ground because of
Yes,
athletes. I mean, there are similar issues they're all working through, regardless of the level.
yes. And I'm not working with the majors,
Right.
but one of my colleagues is doing work with them, and we've consulted, and again, it's like very similar. Like even though they're up in the majors, they're worried about performing and getting sent down,
Right.
and they're worried about family stressors that come up. They're worried about injury. Like everyone has things that they're going through, um, regardless. So it's that is something that's regardless anywhere you go. Even like I feel like when people talk about like younger players, like they're going through a ton of stuff too. Like at 13, you kidding me? Like
Yeah.
there's so much going on. So something, oh, sorry, I have something else too.
Yeah.
Something that's been very interesting and a good challenge for me as well when working in this organization is we have a ton of international players. So
Okay.
with working with you guys, yes, we had international players, but they all spoke English.
Yeah.
And I've had to do workshops where I have a translator for me because we have Spanish, like they mostly Spanish speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Their English isn't great. So also figuring out their culture and what they can relate to. And that's been an awesome challenge for me because I'm so used to just
Yeah.
speaking. So I've had to not only translate my presentations and like my worksheets and everything, but like I also have to, like one time I did a workshop and there was an office reference on it, the office reference. And I was talking to one of my like colleagues and supervisors, and she was like, is that something that they would relate to? And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's such a good point. Like,
Yeah.
so figuring out that has been, and we have an education coordinator that her name is Anaima Garcia, who is phenomenal. And I collaborate with her because she is just incredible and she's immersed in this and I am not. So I'm trying to learn and get better. But that's something, I mean, yeah, it's incredible trying to accommodate for that because I can't imagine playing a sport and not being able to speak the predominant language that everyone else speaks. So
Yeah,
that's been
it's
a great
tough.
challenge. Yeah. But it's what's cool too is like we're all not like we're trying like I took Spanish in high school, but I'm relearning it because I want to be able to speak and communicate with them. But yeah, that's another interesting part of it.
Spanish, speaking of, I'm trying to get back into it too. Just using Duolingo
Yes.
mostly. It's
Yes.
it's pretty good, like helpful, I feel.
I agree. I use Duolingo. I use it on my computer, but I like the app on my phone better. I think it's more fun. Um,
I go the other way. I just use my computer really.
really,
Yeah.
well, I mean,
I'll try the app. I'll try the app.
I like it because there's like stories on it that you can. It's just different.
Huh.
But yes, I have found it to be very helpful. My only like thing is like being able to speak and use it in conversation. Like you're not actually speaking a lot, but yes, Duolingo is great.
Right. Right. Are you finding ways to, like, as good as it is to learn the vocab and grammar, like are you finding ways to practice at work or with the players and like almost fail, but like just go for it?
But yeah, I did that in last spring training with the limited amount of that I knew. And again, like they would laugh at me, like, because they were like, oh, she's trying, but like
Yeah.
she's clearly not very good at it. But they would appreciate it, I would say, because I'm trying. Um, and again, but like I haven't, once I'm in person with them, it will be easier, I would say.
Yeah.
Because right now, no, honestly, we haven't had enough. We had a Spanish class that our colleagues put on for us where we would practice. And it was gosh, how long was that? It was like over 2 months that they like every week we met and they would teach us a unit and we would practice and like talking with each other, using phrases and things like that. And that was awesome. Talk about getting out of your comfort zone. It was
Oh
very
yeah.
uncomfortable but great. And then once like season actually picked up again and they had instructs and everything, we didn't do that. But once we're in season again, I think it'll be really beneficial because you can actually like speak. to these players. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, a face-to-face conversation, you're going to pick up on more than just more of facial expressions and body language. So
yes,
that's
yes,
big.
yes, absolutely.
Well, going back for a minute to your start really with the Orioles, I love that I mean, you acknowledge you don't know everything about baseball. So you were vulnerable and you owned that.
Hmm.
And I guess you kind of it sounds like use that to connect with the players as you're learning baseball.
Hmm. Hmm.
How important is empathy in
Mm.
being an effective mental skills coach or sports psychologist?
Um, I think empathy is crucial for being a human, honestly. Like any profession,
Okay.
I think it's very important and it's sometimes difficult to have. Um, it's something, and I think in my field it is something that's like, you have to have empathy and it's harped on, but I mean, I agree it's a very important skill. And I agree. But I almost think sometimes vulnerability is
Hmm.
just as important because again, like, yes, a player comes to me and they're talking about what's going on, good or bad, and being able to, feel what they're going through and acknowledging it and like celebrating and then like being, oh, like this is difficult, like I'm so sorry, things like that. But then also to acknowledge to them, like you just said, like, I don't know this. Like
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. I'm a human like you and let's work through this together. I think having that vulnerability side is just, if not equally as important. That's being said, like I'm not going to the players and like disclosing my entire life to them. Like they're not helping me.
Right.
But
Right.
just for them to see like, oh, like she's a human, like she's not perfect. Like, oh, mental skills, like she's just positive all the time. And I'm like, no, like I'm a human. Like these things happen.
Yeah.
But yes, to go back to your question, empathy is a huge skill. And like I said, for coaches, I think it's a huge skill as well to have. And reading up on like emotional intelligence can be really helpful for that because I know
Yeah.
sometimes it's very difficult to have that, especially when you're sitting with someone that's maybe you feel complaining about something that shouldn't be complained about, and it's putting yourself in their shoes and getting your ego out of it just to be like, this is their reality right now. This is what they're going through.
Yeah.
It's difficult times.
It is definitely hard at times.
Yes. And it's something that, like, I feel like people are like, oh, like you innately have empathy. And I'm like, no, you can like learn to have empathy. You have to be mindful of it,
Yep.
practice mindfulness, and work towards it. But yes, empathy and vulnerability,
Love it.
huge.
Well, that's helpful for I mean, certainly helpful for mental skills folks in that field. For coaches, I guess thinking like a coach for me, are there any trends you see from working with these athletes that or like common areas for growth? Like what should coaches be looking for?
I get what you're saying. I think, and if I don't, then just let me know.
Yeah.
Um, I just think from like my like studies and in grad school and then experience now, and I would say, and I mean with college athletes, especially like burnout is huge. And
Oh,
yeah, and as a society now, we're like early specialization in sports is a big thing that's come up. And
yeah.
it's very common for burnout because you're always doing the same sport all the time. And there's pressure from parents and teammates and coaches to like go D1 and get the scholarship because let's get like school's expensive now,
Yep.
very very expensive.
Yeah.
So there's all these pressures that are put on these kids at such a young age, and I feel like it takes the fun out of it at times. So I would say like I personally think like making remembering that this is a sport, it's supposed to be fun, and remembering that. I mean, I know my own collegiate experience, like I missed out on, like I forgot about that. Like this was supposed to be fun.
Right.
And um I think like burnout can be a big thing. I've seen that. I've had a lot of players be like, I've had thoughts of like quitting, like, that comes up quite a bit.
Yep.
Let me see. I think what else here. I mean, in regards to mental health,
Hmm.
I think we have to acknowledge that it's very prevalent and there is a stigma, unfortunately, now behind it. But any coach that is listening, like, numerous players on your team have mental health issues, and recognizing that it's not like, oh my God, the end of the world. Like, this kid is like a crazy kid. Like, no, like, it's normal. There's a lot of stressors going on. So being open to talking about it and getting them the help that's necessary. Because again, like, as a coach, you are not qualified to help them with their mental health.
Right.
And as coaches, we typically want to problem solve and help and make them better, right? Like, that's what you do as a coach. And with this, you need to step aside and get your ego out of the way and get them the help that they need. I've had to remind coaches of that. Like, this is not your role.
Yes.
Actually, if you tried, like, it could be like really bad.
That could be really detrimental to the athlete that all you want to do is help.
Yes, that's
and
all you want to do.
It's going to take, like, vulnerability on the coach's part this time to step aside. You don't have all the answers, and that's okay.
Yes.
And just steer them in the direction to find the answers.
Yes. It doesn't make you less of a coach. I would say that it makes you more of a coach because you put your ego aside and you're like, I want to help you. That's what I'm trying to do. And I need to get you the right help. Because you guys as coaches, players tell you so much stuff, right? Like, I told my coaches all this stuff, right? When I was going through stuff. And it's hard to separate because you care so much about them. But again, you have to separate, like I just said, and be like, okay, like, I hear you. What you're going through is very difficult. Let's get you the help that you need. And realizing that there might be a little backlash at first.
Yeah.
And that's okay because you're doing the right thing. The last thing, and like, I've done, like, as a provider, I am big on this now too, is, one of the biggest topics I've heard, like, people want to hear about mental skills is like bouncing back from mistakes and how we can bounce back. And growth mindset for me is such an important component to sport and life. So this idea of viewing, how do you view failure and challenge, and how do you respond to that when it comes up? And in a growth mindset, having this idea that, okay, like, challenge and failure is good because I can learn from my mistakes and get better, and the infinite possibilities that you can do with that. You can always be getting better. You can always learn new things. So I think as coaches, yes, like, you're not going to want to, you're not promoting failure and mistakes. Like, yes, make a mistake. It's, that's a great thing. But having this idea as a coach, like, okay, when a player does make a mistake, like, how am I responding to it?
Yes.
How can we learn from it? Because you're modeling that behavior. So I think I wouldn't say it's a trend because that's something that's always been in sport, but I feel like it is becoming more prominent now because it's just overall helpful and healthy.
Yeah. Certainly at younger ages, and college sports has always been this way. Like, there's such an emphasis on, wins and losses, and putting stock in that, I mean, at a young age, that can't be healthy. And at a college game, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, you're like you said, you're here to have fun. You're here to compete and be the best version of yourself. Sure.
Yes.
And, like, sometimes you lose. I think if we can normalize that, and
Yes.
you can still learn from losses, maybe even more from losses than you do wins. Like, there's always hopefully a trajectory of growth, regardless of the final score.
Yes, I agree. Like, I think you learn more from losses than wins, like you just said. And growing is like all over the place, right? There's not one set way, but I think you nailed it on the head with there's an emphasis on wins and losses. And this is, I just finished watching Ted Lasso, so I recommend that to anyone.
I'm a big Ted Lasso guy.
Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. I just like watch it and like, I wish I was on that team. Like, and he emphasizes this, you just said, like, wins and losses. Like, I'm not focused on that. He's focused on building relationships with the players and their well-being. And I've always been a fan of like how Coach Apple and you guys as a staff are yes, concerned about them being great soccer players, but you're more concerned about them being great men and helping them go into the world as great men. And I think that's why I love Ted Lasso so much. For many other reasons, it's a great show. It actually, we did a book club with the coaches with the Orioles. We read Dare to Lead. I recommend that to any coach.
All
Um,
right.
yes, great. Brennan Brown. She is a psychologist that talks, about leading and leadership, and it incorporates a lot of these concepts and like vulnerability, empathy. So I would recommend that for coaches to read. It's a great one. It's a good one.
Nice. Yeah. And if you're not reading that, then catch up on Ted Lasso.
Yeah. Or just watch Ted Lasso.
I know his positivity is just so contagious.
Yes.
It pumps me up just watching like a silly TV show. Like, oh my God, I can't wait to go to practice now.
I was watching it and I was just smiling because I was like, this is incredible. Now, granted, this is a TV show, right? So in reality, we have a lot of things that come up. So I'm also a proponent, like, yes, positivity is great, but and this isn't me being pessimistic or anything, but it's not realistic to be positive all the time. Like, I personally find at times those people to be annoying and it's not genuine because life happens and things come up. And I preach this to my players to be like, common thing, like positive versus negative self-talk. We hear that all the time. Instead, I say effective versus ineffective self-talk because there's times where you just can't. You're not going to sit there and be like, oh, like sunshine and rainbows. So being effective with how you coach and how you speak to yourself, that's how that's one of my philosophies.
Effective versus ineffective. Okay. That's helpful.
Well, yeah, because some people, like, I always give this example too, like Andy, everyone's different in what they need, right? Andy Murray, if you watch him play tennis, he gets mad at himself when he makes a mistake or isn't performing well. Typically, right, as a mental skills person, we'd be like, is that like the best way to respond to that situation? But that helps him to like perform better. So is that positive? Typically, no. Like if you're hitting yourself and like smashing your racket, we wouldn't say that's a positive thing.
Right.
It's an effective thing for him. So that's kind of an example of that.
Effective versus ineffective, like pessimistic versus optimistic. In the end, it's all our choice.
Yes.
Like something's going to happen in sport or in life, and the reality is we can't control that, but we can control how we respond to that. And that
Yes.
probably plays into the growth mindset.
Oh my, that is literally whenever I do my first workshop, it's about ideal mindset and this concept of that. Again, everyone's different and what they need to perform their best. But what we all have in common is that we can control how we respond to a situation and whatever comes up. And that's like where mindfulness comes in too. But yes, that's the biggest thing is people will be like, what, like, oh, like I didn't know what to do. I'm like, yeah, you didn't know what you were doing. Like you have control over that. Let's work on that response. Because the problem is not the problem. The problem is the response to the problem. And control. That's what we have control over. Not the umpire or not the ref, not the weather, not the opposing team, not the opposing coach. Like you only have control over yourself. So yes.
Yeah. People, we have sovereignty over our actions, over our thoughts.
Yeah. Come on, people. Yeah. Take responsibility.
Yeah. I know. It's sometimes we forget that. So you're the reminder that we need, Kathryn.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stand there and be like, control. I sound like a broken record. I'm like, control you can control. Control you can control. But it's true. And like it's again like part of this vulnerability thing. I have to check myself at times on how I respond to things. And I think I hope people realize that like like I am by no means perfect. And I have reactions to things too, but checking myself and be like, okay, let's bring myself back to the present moment and what like I'm doing. Like anyone listening, I challenge you when you are driving and there's traffic or someone's like on your butt and tailgating you and like how you respond to it and then realizing how you respond to it and trying to shift your focus back to driving and what the present moment is. It's difficult, but you'll notice how frequently you're getting mad or angry over things that like don't mean really much and you can't control.
Yeah, in the grand scheme of life, being in a traffic jam for 30 seconds,
Yeah.
pretty insignificant.
Yeah, and you can't control it. Like, what are you going to do? You can't do anything about it. So might as well like turn the music on, enjoy the time that you have to yourself and make it the best of it.
Yeah, any book recommendations? They could be in the mental skills realm or completely unrelated.
Okay. So I'm actually really grateful because during this pandemic, we've had book club as an organization, and we've read a ton of books with players and then with coaches. I've really enjoyed all of them. I mean, hands down, Mindset by Carol Dweck is
Yes.
just a given for a coach, for a team, given for team like related things. I love Culture Code that I read with coaches, talking about how to like develop a great culture. When your team Legacy is a phenomenal book, which is about the All Blacks rugby team.
Yes.
That is such a good book. Our players loved that book. We would have amazing discussions on that. Because that's like less scientific and more just this team is badass and how do they become like that? And it's their culture is just incredible. So
Yeah.
Legacy. Like I said, Dare to Lead is another great book for coaching. I'm trying to think of all the books we read.
This was with the team or the coaching staff or both?
Players and well, we had a group of like coaches and players, and then we have one with just the coaches that I'm in. So like the more like ones about culture and leading are with the coaches, and then like legacy, mindset, the inner game of tennis as a mental skills. That's a short read that is very helpful, applicable not just to tennis, but life and sport. Yeah, that's what I got. That's a lot. There's a lot right there, right? That's a good
Well,
amount.
there's my reading list of 2021. Jeez.
There you go. Yeah, I can like send them to you. I have them all. This is like a classic.
We love a classic. It's a
Classic.
classic for a reason.
Yeah, my professors in grad school always told us to read this book. And again, like it's related to baseball, but it's just sports. Like it relates to every sport. Heads Up Baseball by Ken Ravizza is a classic, like I said, because it's what I love about it is it's very easy to read. It's written from the perspective of an athlete or a coach. It's not like
Ooh.
scientific. Yeah.
Okay.
So it gives activities in there to do, kind of like a workbook. I know like with my manuals that I make related to like workshops, like I go to him and adapt from that because it's like the sports like he's a sports like god. Like unfortunately he's passed away now, but like he is incredible. So Heads Up Baseball is another great one.
Yeah, I like for my own personal reading to mix it up so it's not five books in a row that I'm reading that are super sciency, that there's
Yes.
kind of like a barrier of entry, like I'm out of my element. So it's cool
Yes.
when I can mix it up with like a legacy where you're kind of in the locker room and you're learning about the team. And that's what I look for.
Fires me up. But yeah, I agree with you. Having the mix of books is good.
Yeah. Well, cool. Hey, thanks for coming on.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. I
Yeah.
miss you guys. Wow, I'm honored. I'm honored.
I'm honored.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too.
Okay, bye.
Big love. Peace.